Hello, I'm Jim Grant, welcoming you to another edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. Last week, if you were here, you knew we were talking about the recent Synod held at the Vatican in October to discuss the situation of the Church in the Middle East. We really covered it a bit well about the religious elements that were involved, the ecumenical dimension of it all, how there were so many participants from many different Catholic and Orthodox traditions, all meeting with the Pope and deciding how they will plot out a new strategy for what some have called surviving in the Middle East. The Church is diminishing its presence year by year. That is what we covered in the first program. We have Brother Donald Mansir, who is a brother of the Christian schools, here to share with us his own experience, having lived in Jerusalem 6 years in a stretch, and now coming back from a study session and work there. He'll be returning soon. We thank him for being here again today. And Deacon Mark Shirin, who was also formed in his theological studies in Lebanon. We thank him and the Armenian community for sharing their insights into this topic. As we begin, could you help us regroup, Brother Donald, and maybe break new ground over the political dimensions of the issue facing the Church in the Middle East? We've got some persons you might like to introduce us to. Some of the pictures that Gonzalo will show now introduce us to some more of these important players who were invited by His Holiness.
As we mentioned, one of the aims of the Synod was to strengthen and identify the identity of the Christian community in face of the other communities that are there, in particular the Muslim communities. And so to this end, His Holiness asked a Shiite and a Sunni Muslim to address the community. One is the Ayatollah Damad from Tehran, Iran, who's a Shiite, whose address was very interesting. He expressed the concern that the Shiite Muslims have in Iran and in Iraq for the Christians who are caught between a rock and a hard place, namely the conflict between the Shiite and the Sunni communities, and that the Christian community has so diminished that the international community seems to have forgotten them. So his words were extremely important and addressed a serious concern that it seems that at least the Shiite Muslim community has about the plight of the Christian community.
And then the second guest invited would have been coming from the Sunni tradition?
Yes, he was from the Sunni tradition, from the Lebanon, al-Samaid, who is director of an institute and commissioned for Muslim-Christian dialogue. And he expressed some of the similar concerns about the importance for the Christian community to be thriving in that part of the world. So it was very important for the ongoing Muslim-Christian conversation that they be there during this synod.
Mark, about Lebanon.
Well, I just had a quote from the executive director of that Muslim Christian dialogue, Muhammad Samak. And basically, in a word, he felt that the Christians played a very important part of the identity of the Middle East. And quoting him, he said, "Without them, our society would not be what it is. Christians have played a fundamental role in the past and recent history, enriching Arab society culturally, sociologically, and politically and spiritually."
Now, he's coming from a country where 1/3 would be Christian in Lebanon. And yet in the total Middle East, which we look at the 22 countries of that Middle East, 356 million people, 5.6% might be Christian. But is he saying that regardless of their small
numbers, right,
their contribution, their influence, and their importance, even to the 95%, is very important?
That's in a nutshell.
We need to remember
and
that.
That's from the voice of a Muslim.
Which is very important, and if we want to make one thing clear in this program, it's not only a lament of, oh, poor us, things are tough over there. it's a wake-up call to the world to be attentive. And I think the Pope is definitely there.
Yes.
We need, as believers in the Western world, especially certain people have said, the Americans, the Europeans, better be paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East in the area of Christian life.
Absolutely.
We have some more pictures that are very beautiful, but also capturing the fact of what is the Middle East faith looking like. It has a lot of different colors to it, a lot of different flavors. Gonzalo, can you put up some more of these Christian pictures for Brother and Mark to comment on?
Here we have a Coptic monk with the three fingers together, demonstrating the Trinity, and the two fingers, the two natures of Christ. Egypt has 3 million Copts in a society that's about a little over 30 million. So it's a sizable community there. The Coptic Church is represented throughout the Middle East. So an important community and participant in that, dating back, of course, to the time, just after the time of Christ, some might like to say.
The picture of the procession with the children, the young servers, locate this for us and remind us the importance of liturgy for the community.
Absolutely. This is in Cairo, one of the Coptic churches. One of the it's just before the offertory, as we understand it. It's the procession just before the offertory begins in the Coptic church. And again, it's this diversity of liturgy and rite and culture and background and language and the rest of it that makes the Christianity in the Middle East so beautiful, frankly.
Mark, the next picture is, again, your beloved Lebanon. What does this remind you of when you were there, when you have just visited it again a year ago?
Well, the beauty of Lebanon. This happens to be in the city of Zahle, which is near the Syrian border, and Lebanon is a combination of mountainous regions and of course the Mediterranean Sea and it's considered the Riviera of the Middle East. It's a wonderful place to live.
And that would have been a Maronite Catholic church. The next picture puts us with Syrian Catholic community, a very interesting picture. And maybe, Donald, you could even tell us how this was even taken. This next picture showing, I think, a cleric, but also a family.
Yes, it's a Syriac Catholic priest with his family in their home in Bethlehem, and of course it's that community which suffered so terribly in Baghdad with the slaughter of 61 Christians in the Syriac Catholic Church in Baghdad.
You know, one thing about this family setup that we have here, one of the recommendations that I read of the 44 is that the church be looking at the possibility of married clergy, because for the Eastern Church, this is not a problem. It's rather a treasure that they have kept all the time. Now, there are some churches that you're going to show us that are, again, Coptic, but located in Jerusalem. Donald, tell us about the one we're going to see from two different angles.
Yes, we have the new tower of the church that's connected to the Coptic Patriarchate in the old city of Jerusalem. There are only about 5,000 Christians left in the old city of Jerusalem, and 22,000 Muslims, and about 500 Armenians, 3,000 Jews. So it's a small community of Christians, just over 2% now. But they've done a lot of work to support the Coptic community in Jerusalem. These are restored walls to the bell tower of the Coptic Patriarchate Church in Jerusalem, and next to it is a high school for girls that the Vatican, in fact, has helped finance.
Now, the next picture actually is the Church of the Redeemer, the Lutheran Church, because we want to be mindful that it is not only Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, but also Christian mainline communities also usually have at least a church. So there's the Lutheran Center.
Yes, the Holy Redeemer. There are about 2,500 international Christians from the international community who are living there, and a number of them are German-speaking, and a number of the German-speaking are Lutheran. And so this is their church, right next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, famous for its acoustics and its concerts.
I think the Anglicans have a pretty good community or representation in the Holy City as well.
Yeah.
You know, when I did live there for a year in '78, all of these pictures, believe it or not, these are not new churches. They were even there in '78. And it is amazing how so much of it is still the same, and yet Brother Donald, who has gone back many, many different times, how has it changed if you could give us an insight since '78, for example, since the time of the Camp David Accord, how has Jerusalem and Israel, in your mind, evolved, morphed, changed for life of the Christian community?
It continues to deteriorate. That is, the life of the Christian community continues to deteriorate because the day-to-day life for the ordinary person, I won't even say citizen, because most of the Christians are not citizens. They don't have Israeli passports. They have identity cards, but they're not citizens. So employment is difficult, education is difficult, and even if you're educated, what sort of employment do you have? Passes, access to churches. If you're unemployed, you can't start a family or you can't keep your family very well. And this continues to deteriorate as long as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues, as long as the occupation continues.
On that note, believe it or not, we once again are told by our sponsors we must take a break. Don't go anywhere. We still have half of a program to share with you. And believe it or not, by the end, you will be fully learning the impact of this synod and what it is that we're going to be asking you to do about it. This is a synod that actually asks us to participate in its forward progress. So stay tuned. Don't go away.
KNXT, the nation's only full-powered broadcast station owned and operated by a Catholic diocese in the U.S. and streaming live on the internet at knxt.tv. Need your support to keep the message of the good news alive. Just go to knxt.tv. Click on the Make a Financial Gift. Go to Donate and fill out your one-time or monthly offering under PayPal. It's just that easy. Your donation makes it possible for KNXT, Catholic Television, to continue its ministry by celebrating the Mass and proclaiming the gospel. Thank you from KNXT.
Welcome back again to our continuing discussion with Brother Donald Mansir, a brother of the Christian schools, and Mark Shirin, a deacon from Holy Trinity Armenian Apostolic Church, as they're sharing with us their own insights into the recent synod that was held at the Vatican in October about the life of the church in the Middle East. We're continuing looking at some pictures because these help us appreciate what is the church in the Middle East. Especially, we're looking at a lot of Jerusalem pictures where Brother Donald has spent long, long years and very important months of study recently and months of work there, where he'll be returning early in the new year. Why don't we look at the first one, which puts us in the Garden of Olives, and remind us of this Church of All Nations, brother.
Yeah, the Church of All Nations, or its other name, is the Basilica of the Agony. on the bottom left is the site where Jesus prayed after the Last Supper, asking that the cup be passed. And up further, the golden domes of the Russian Orthodox Church, Mary Magdalene. And there are other churches as you go up the mount which reflect the various times and situations in the life of Christ.
And then the next picture is just going to be another look at the church a little bit more closely. And this is actually a magnificent church that I have prayed at many times when I was living right across in the old city, actually. Anything else to say, Mark or Donald, about this magnificent church?
Just one of the things, as we're talking about what the international community role might be, is that its second name as Church of All Nations is nations that contributed to its building, to the financing of its building, such that there remains an exhortation to the international Christian community to support the living church in the Holy Land and the Middle East.
And one final picture that we really need to show, because if we're talking about Islam, we need to actually see what is in Jerusalem, a very clear indication of the presence of Islam from the 7th century, and that would be the Dome of the Rock built on the Temple Mount. Donald and Mark, you've been there. Anything that you would like to share about the significance of the connection with Islam?
Well, I'm not sure about the connection with Islam, but we might say a little bit about this dialogue that we hope for. But just one thing that often we see in photographs or clips of Jerusalem, the Dome of the Rock, because it's so impressive. But what we have to understand, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, is that Jerusalem is the patrimony for Christians as well. Jerusalem is not just the patrimony of Muslims and Jews. It's our patrimony, and we must remember that. And I think one of the conversations that is hoped for from the following the Synod is that all of us Christians begin to understand that Jerusalem is our patrimony.
And I think that brings up one more topic that we've touched on briefly, but haven't really given it the full discussion I think we wanted to do, and we do it right now. Under the political reality of life in the Middle East, one topic is called the rise of political Islam. And I wonder if you'd like to address that and to help us appreciate what it is that radical Islam might be, or political Islam, like Islamic states, as opposed to an Islamic presence in a country. Any observations, personal or professional?
I think there's certain states that are Islamic. For example, the state of Iran, and then there's certain states like Lebanon, which have more of a freedom of religion. In fact, there's like 33 different confessions within the country of Lebanon. And then you have civil states like Turkey and Syria. And the problem for the Christian community is that even though we're considered citizens, the Christians in those countries, we're somehow relegated to a second-class citizenship. The measure or the balance is not there. We on paper we enjoy all the rights of citizenship, but the reality is that we're second-class citizens. And I think one of the aims of the Synod was to change that balance. So Christians, even though they're a minority in many of the countries, still are afforded the rights of citizenship and all the responsibilities that go with citizenship, and that Muslims aren't necessarily favored, even though the majority is Muslim. So I think that's an important political concept that the Synod tried to grapple with. And that's basically what I wanted to say about that subject.
Brother Donald, the topics, as you help to see the outline, the next word comes up, Israeli occupation. It certainly was something that was not on the agenda at the Synod, because the Pope had really hoped it would be, as they say, pastoral, non-political, and yet it is all over the place because it's inevitable. Can you help us appreciate the importance of dealing with the occupation, or how you would wish it were better framed in terms of the struggle for the Christian communities in the Middle East?
Two words. One is honesty, and I'll come to the other one. But by honesty, I mean that governments who are signatories to international conventions, agreements, need to be honest about what they're signing and that they're going to follow through. If the state of Israel is going to ask for oaths of allegiance by its citizens, which declare that Israel is a Jewish state, how does a Christian or Muslim do that? And yet you say there's freedom of religion. If the citizenry has equal opportunity for advancement for a life which is set out by the Christian churches, but the Palestinian Christians can't get to the church or can't get to work, can't get a permit, can't get eyeglasses, then there's a problem, the day-to-day life. So there has to be an honesty about this. And tagging what the deacon had to say is that even Turkey, which says it's secular, we need to be very careful about Turkey, I think more so than Iran even, that political Islam is that Islam which is coextensive with the governance of a people. Political Judaism or Zionism is coextensive with the governance of a people. Christianity is not coextensive with any governance, and so these countries who really want their governance to be coextensive with religion need to be honest about it. And if it is, those who are not of that confession are going to suffer, and that's happening terribly under the occupation. And it's happening in Turkey and in some of these other places as well. So we need to be honest about what's really going on there.
I think, talking about, because what's happening in Turkey, for example, the assassination of the bishop on the eve of the conclave, the synod, that's a result of Muslim fanaticism and fundamentalism and extremism. And I think that is something we should all battle against. And most of all, the spiritual leaders of Islam, they condemn that. In fact, they condemned the bombing and the assassination and the slaughter in the Syrian Catholic Church before Christian leaders condemned it. They feel it's I think that is a threat. This fanaticism is a threat more so to legitimate Islam as well as it is to Christians living in those parts.
One country that we did talk about briefly, we talked about actually the cardinal from Baghdad, from Babylon. We'd like to show a clip now that is a very sad reminder of how violence happens even in cathedrals, even in churches. Let's see that sad picture to remind us of the gravity of the situation in Iraq from Religion and Ethics a few weeks ago.
Fear and mourning continue among Christians in Iraq after this week's deadly attack on a Catholic church in Baghdad. More than 50 people were killed and more than 70 wounded. Religious leaders around the world denounced the violence. Al-Qaeda, however, said it will continue to target Christians in Iraq. The Christian population there has fallen sharply since the Iraq War began. Some estimate the number of Christians has decreased by nearly half, dropping from approximately 1 million to 600,000.
Brother Donald and Mark, I think all of us have seen this on all the news. but I wonder if there's things that you think are not being presented in the secular press, in the secular media, about exactly what it is that did happen in Baghdad with this massacre of Christians. Is there anything else we need to appreciate more than the disaster that it was, the tragedy?
I think it's a backlash because of Americans' presence in Iraq. I think that, and unfortunately, all Christians get painted with the same brush. So even though, and the United States, even though it's a civil society, it's considered by the Muslim community as a Christian nation. And because of that, that instigates a lot of this fanaticism. Unfortunately, our brethren in the Middle East, our Christian brethren, they're unfortunate. They're martyrs. They're living martyrs in those countries, and it's unfortunate that sometimes things that the Western world does instigates these type of animosity between Christians and Muslims.
There's one final clip I'd like to show because it would let us maybe go off with a positive observation of what is sometimes being done positively in the Middle East. Gonzalo, can you show the clip of the renovations being done at the beautiful Basilica of the Nativity in Bethlehem? And then Brother Donald maybe could conclude our program commenting on how that came to be.
In Bethlehem, renovations are in the works for the Church of the Nativity. The Palestinian government announced that it will begin repairs on the church's roof, pillars, and mosaics, all of which have been damaged by centuries of weather and wear and tear. This will be the first major renovation for the church since it was built in the 4th century. The site draws millions of tourists each year to what's believed to be the place Jesus was born.
We wanted to squeeze that last clip in because it's so important to see that certainly certain governments can do good things for people. And Brother Donald was telling me that this only was accomplished because there is a commitment on the part of the Palestinian Authority to make sure that things like a church could be renovated after 1,600 years. We wish that you will be next week with us watching another program, because this is all we can share with you today. Till next week, God bless.